Well, thank you guys all so much for coming on. We have Chelsea coming right off of a plane this morning, and we had Aspen hopping on. Jamie's an old pro. Jamie's been on both the Get to Know Your Wedding Pro podcast and the Best Made Weddings podcast to talk before. Thank you guys all so much for coming on today. This is the start of a kind of a new idea through the Best Made Weddings podcast, basically saying, so I'm engaged, now what? What should I be doing? I'm going to talk to a bunch of different vendor types throughout the course of the next, few months about this. But today we're going to start with photography. I just saw, we see it every week online, another post, someone, a bride or groom post in the wedding groups. Yay, we just got engaged. We're looking for a photographer. They get 500 people comment. They get overwhelmed. It's not a good experience for them. It's not a good experience as a way to find photographers or any vendor that you want. So I kind of wanted to hop on today, talk to some real photographers. What is their advice? If you just got engaged and you want to hire a photographer for your wedding, what should you be looking for? What questions should you ask? What should you be thinking about that we're not thinking about? So thank you guys all so much for coming on. Jamie, why don't you introduce yourself and then we'll go around and we'll get into this.
Sure. Hey, I'm Jamie of Jamie Buckley Photography here in Seattle. I do wedding photography, couples, some boudoir every now and then, mainly weddings.
And Aspen, what about you?
I'm Aspen, and I'm Aspen Jeannè Photography. I am a California native who relocated to Seattle and primarily do weddings and all things couple, elopement, engagement, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah.
Perfect. And Chelsea, what about you? Hopping on late. I appreciate it.
Hi. So I am from Hawaii. I moved to Seattle 3.5 years ago, and I'm still dually based between both, which is super fun. I also specialize in weddings and couples, and I'm also a business coach. So I like that, I also coach people to do this for their clients and the same thing. So I'm excited about this.
And so I think we all, I posted this yesterday online. I said, this is what I'm thinking. I think we all kind of know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Someone gets engaged, they go on, to one of the wedding Facebook groups, or they post on their own thing or whatever. Hey, I just got engaged. They get all these people that respond. It's like a race to the bottom. You get all this, competing, styles and how the people work and all this different stuff. So first off, I guess we'll start with Chelsea and go back around. When you see these, when you hear this, obviously, I think you guys are all a little step above, obviously, these, a lot of the people that comment on a lot of these posts, but I think that you guys can give insights to this. So what do you think, when you see these and you hear about these and kind of this mass overwhelming when people get engaged and they're looking for photographers?
So I feel like it depends on so as a couple, if you're going to go post on any of those boards, it seems like the right place to start, because typically not a lot of people are running around in circles with professional photographers. And so no one really knows what they're doing. It seems like a great place to go because that's where all the photographers are. And it depends on what you want. So it can end up being a more work and more overwhelm than help sometimes, because there's so many people offering so many things. Everyone's like, I'll do it for free and I'll do it for this. And so that's a whole nother conversation about what you want to choose to invest in. But when you're posting on these groups, a lot of times you don't even get what you ask for. So someone's like, I need someone who's Colorado based, who can do this, this, and this for this much. And also when you're posting that, sometimes, maybe you've done some research, but oftentimes most of what I've seen and what I've experienced with a lot of my friends getting engaged and doing this before talking to me is they're just pulling numbers from Google. And a lot of times the Google estimates for what people, should expect to invest aren't accurate, or aren't accurate for the quality and the expertise that most people are hoping for one of the most important, special, wonderful days of their lives. So posting on those things, if you want to, go for it, but know that you are going to get blasted by so many comments. And it's a pretty saturated market, no matter what city you're in, and everyone is willing to go wherever. A lot of photographers have oh, I'm Hawaii and Seattle and worldwide, which sure, we're all willing to go worldwide, but that also means travel fees. That also means someone who isn't maybe familiar with your location. So I feel like more so than posting in those groups, you're better off looking at like Google or, I don't love the Knot or Wedding Wire, but those are good listings to see who's actually local to where you're going to go, and someone who has at least some experience with either your venue or the weather or just general things. Like a lot of people come and shoot in Hawaii and don't understand like just basic safety. Like I have a friend who's in Iceland, and people go and shoot in Iceland and put their clients and themselves in a lot of really dangerous situations. So I think most of the time it's better to err on the side of hiring someone locally and searching for things that way. Unless you've had your eyes on someone forever, which in which case you probably wouldn't be in that Facebook group anyway.
Aspen, what about you? What do you, obviously we all kind of lament over this. So what do you think when you see all these, people post and this kind of race to the bottom mentality?
Yeah, I actually did this for my sister's wedding. She got married in November, and I feel like it was interesting to be a poster. Like I've been both a commenter and a poster. And I think the thing that saved my butt when I was posting is like, my advice is if you're going to do this, which I also am with you, Chelsea, like not the best maybe. But if for whatever reason you're feeling powerful and you want to get a lot of attention really fast, I had cut it off after 10 minutes because I already had like 45 comments, and it sucks. And, there were 200 likes because my sister got married in Cabo, which it was a destination wedding. It was a whole thing. She's super hot. So it's her fiance, everyone, they're an interracial couple, or sort of, we're half. And so that's a whole other thing, but like very desirable for your portfolio. And so I would just say, if you're going to post, be on it, give it 10, 15 minutes. Or like give a comment number that you're willing to go through, because if you just leave it open-ended, I mean, you've all seen them. There's 200 comments. And like you said, Chelsea, 90% of them are not in the location that you want or even really eligible to your standards. My sister wanted a photographer who had a style similar to mine. And I can't tell you how many people didn't even look like mine. Or so I think the other thing that's really interesting is when I see these blasts now and these posts, is I feel like more often than not, they're for people who are looking for a bargain potentially, or like a deal. It's like, oh, I'm getting married in Cabo and I'm hot, so I'll do my 12-hour wedding for $1,800, and people will do it. But you have to kind of ask yourself, okay, well, what kind of quality is that going to bring to this day? That is, there's no do-overs on this day. And so I think that's the thing that comes to mind is like, if you're going to do it, fine, cut it off very quickly. And, if you're going to do research before, figure out what styles you like and your preference, because not all styles are the same, and see if you can recognize that, so that when you're going through those comments, you're finding what you actually want and not choosing a photographer who is within their right and their style, but ultimately it's not what you want.
That's a great point. I want to talk about styles too. I want to get Jamie's thoughts on this, and then that's a great topic to bring up for our next questions. Jamie, what do you think about all this stuff?
So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword in that I remember in 2012 when I was planning my own wedding and trying to find, like, it was obviously 8 years ago, but trying to find a photographer was really difficult because, you went to Google and you searched, like we got married up in Victoria, so it was Victoria wedding photographer or Victoria Canada wedding photographers. And, you went through the first page and you clicked and you went to their website, and then you went back and then you went to the website, and then you're like, okay, I'm done this for an hour. I'm going to go away and come back. And then you come back and you search it. Well, then you search it again, you get different search results. You're like, oh, did I already click on this? Oh, blah, blah. So it's kind of nice having it in one place where it's like a lazy person's notebook. You just make your post. You can come back to your post at any time and you can reference it. But at the same time, I do think people just are scrolling through their Facebook and they see this, looking for a photographer, just say, hey, I'd love to do it. Put in your web address and go away. You didn't even read the post. So I think definitely for people, the more specific you can be, style, how long, I mean, obviously not everyone knows how long they want in the beginning, but roughly, a lot of places won't let you put a price range, which can kind of suck because you can't narrow it down that way. But if you can, do it. But then what I do, because when I refer weddings to other people, I started doing kind of like a captcha where I'll put like, if you read this whole post, type in with your comment, googity boogity bing bong. And if nobody puts that in their comment, I'm like, I'm not even going to go on your website. You can follow simple instructions, take 5 minutes of your time to read my post. You're done. So that's kind of a good way to winnow it down to people who actually want the job, but like because they like the sound of who you are, versus just people who are scrolling through Facebook and are bored.
I wanted to add to that too, because that's super important. Like, for you to make sure that someone actually cares about you when they offer to shoot your wedding and isn't just like, oh, sick, I'll make a couple grand. It's like, exactly. If you don't type oogity boogity, you're here just for the money and you really don't actually care about what I'm asking for. So I love that. And that's like, I love doing that too. I'm like, leave your favorite GIF. And then if someone doesn't leave a GIF, or like you can tell it's just copy pasted and super generic, you're like, okay, well, pass. I think it's really important to like at least let someone pass that very first vibe check that they actually read your post.
Well, even on, there's so many, and we're not going to hate on the Facebook posts all day, because I do want to get into like actionable stuff, but I totally agree, because even the ones, because I do video, and so in a lot of the groups, there might be 50 photography ones for like one video one, but even on like the video ones, you'll get these photographers like, I'm available, and it's like, you didn't even read, where it said, video, whatever on there. So, so whether you're going to go to Facebook, you're going to post, you're going to look for the stuff, or you're going to look otherwise, would you guys agree that first and foremost, we get engaged, you need to figure out what style you're looking for, right? Is that, as photographers, I'm asking, is that like the first question that couples should be asking, or what is the first question that couples should be asking when they're getting engaged and wanting to look for a photographer?
Yeah, I would say like, yes, style in that how you want your photos to look.
Right. I mean, so, and when we talk style, and you guys run me through these, right? We have, like documentary, right? Or gloomy and bright. I don't know why. I'm not a photographer, so I'm not walk me through some of the styles, and maybe can we define some of those for people that are thinking about, looking for a photographer?
Yeah, I'll start. I'll give a couple, and then you guys can fill in, because I think about this a lot. But I think one of the styles that I see a lot is, I would say, like, there's the bright and airy, which that covers a lot, but it's the more colorful, and in my mind, a lot of times it lends itself to be more pink, which I'm sure we as photographers can see, but maybe a client might not be able to notice. But it's typically much more bold colors. And there's a much bigger variation between colors, so they're not the same. And then on the other hand, so you've got bright and airy, and then you've got maybe more moody or like neutral tones, where a lot of the colors tend to be the same, or just a more mild version, so they're not that bright and vibrant. And those, in my mind, tend to be more green often, which is on the opposite side, right? We've got magenta on one side and green on the other, and blue and yellow on opposites. And so I feel like blue, magenta tends to be on one side, green and yellow on the other side, to kind of start that. And then as far as like actual colors go, and I think too, like being a person of color, I always look at how and if they edit skin tones, because oftentimes the warmer, darker, moody photographers tend to make someone with darker skin maybe a little bit more yellow, to maintain the bright, or like the warmth of their photos, which is kind of another topic. But like, I think that's an interesting variation, that you might not see that as often when the photos are brighter and more pink, but it's a little bit more touchy when they get into the yellow space. And so bright and airy, dark and moody and muted kind of are at least the spectrum that I often see.
And then are those the two extremes, and then people are looking in between then? Is that pretty, I mean, for video, I shoot true to life as much as I can, right? So that's why I'm asking, like, what do you guys define all this stuff as? Because I just tried to make it look like it looked, when we were there. So Chelsea, what do you think about, are there styles within that, more stylized, I don't know, more true to life? I mean, what are people looking for?
Well, so I feel like I've had people tell me they want one thing and then show me the example, and I'm like, oh, okay, I know what you're
Yes.
talking about. So more than like having someone, and also that just it makes me wild, and I am still guilty of it too. But describing our style as photographers, we're like, oh my god, it's like effervescent and brilliant and whatever. We make up all these words that don't make any sense, and we're like, isn't that fancy? You're like, what does that mean? So more so for clients, like if for couples looking for a specific style, like make a Pinterest board. As much as a lot of photographers like hate on Pinterest boards, it's so important. And because a lot of times maybe people aren't super attached to the editing as much as the feeling. So being able to, know your chops as a photographer and be like, oh, cool. So I can see your Pinterest board here. I see like, you like this kind of style. Is it candid? Oh, do you want to look like a Vogue model? Oh, you need something more like fine art, maybe like more editorial. So I think that's a better vibe more than anything. And this is my personal thing. I edit pretty true to life too. I have my own specialties on things, but um, more important than like that specific coloring typically is like how the photos make you feel. And I think that's really important too. So you can like, oh, this like color looks really pretty, but making sure that like you can imagine yourself in them and it's not just like the type of editing. So I think it's important, obviously, like people have vibes and making sure also if you're going to have a videographer that those two can match or at least be cohesive. I've seen some like kind of, it feels jarring if you have video that doesn't match your photos. It just feels a little, for me, that's my personal thing. I just think it feels jarring to when they don't kind of gel together. But that's what I would say. I more so is like instead of trying to explain yourself, just show us and we can tell you what you're asking for because there's so many different styles and styles change. So if you really love something that's like super poppin' right now, that's great if you love that, and just keep in mind like, yes, I'm going to continue to love this, and yes, it will continue to match my vibe. Or like, so for true to life, whatever we call it, that looks like how the day went, or it's pretty similar, that maybe won't have as much of a timestamp on it. And so if that matters to you, that's something to consider too. But I think that's been the biggest thing, is that people don't really know all the time what they want. They have Pinterest boards and they like Instagram, and so I always ask like, make sure that you've gone through my Pinterest or like my Instagram and making sure that most of what you see there is what you like. If some of it is, but not all of it, then like that's important too, because it's just as important for us as your photographers to be able to deliver and have you be super stoked in the end, instead of you telling us something and we're like, oh, totally, I can definitely do that. And then you being disappointed. Like nobody wants that. You're unhappy, photographer's unhappy. So the more you can show us and we can help you decide and not try to chameleon and say, oh, I can do that. Like we just need to be honest with ourselves. Like, is that our style or not? And for photographers, like, I don't want to should, but like it's in our best interest to have our clients' best interest at heart. Like why choose to do something that we're not super confident that we can really deliver on? And I think that's what can happen from those Facebook posts, is that people maybe don't know their style or just are like trying it out, which is fine. It's great. And like people have budgets. And if your budget is more in line with someone that you might get from a Facebook post, great. Nothing wrong with that. You just have to know what you're getting and be okay with, the levels and things like that come with whatever range of price you're hoping to invest in.
Yeah, I have a great story when we get talking about matching portfolios. Jamie, what do you think? Styles, people, doing the Pinterest board thing, do you recommend that? I mean, what do you, in terms of people trying to figure out like, what the aesthetic that they want for the photos to be?
Yeah, I definitely prefer people to show me like examples of what they want versus saying to me, oh, I want a dark and moody photographer, so I came to you, and then I'm like, but I'm not really that dark and moody, so how did you end up here? Like, it's like I don't want them to kind of put me in a box before they've seen my work. So I would prefer that they find a website of someone that they like, find a Pinterest board, than just like be like, hey, I like bright and airy photos. Can you do that? Like, don't go to like, you don't go to Burger King and be like, hey, I was just at McDonald's. Like, can I have a Big Mac? Like, yeah. You go to Burger King because you like their fries. I don't know, what's Burger King known for. So like,
The Whopper.
don't just expect
Whopper.
I was over there known for. I don't go to Burger King. The one around the corner is terrible.
But so I get the point that you're saying, right? So that you want, and I get this a lot, in especially like when I was starting in video too. You get this a lot, right? I want this. Do you do this? Versus, hey, I have looked at your work and I enjoyed the things, the words that you have on your website, the photos that you have, the things that I've learned about you, right? So, I mean, is that when people, Aspen, did you have something that you wanted to say, or were you agreeing with Jamie? Aspen's got something else before we go.
I have something I want to say. I think when people come to me, one of the things that I try to help, and I don't know if you guys do this, but is kind of educating the client on even what they're looking for. Because for example, I had a friend of mine who I'm doing their elopement in May. They came to me and were like, the colors were all brown and white. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. Can I see them? Like, they're like, it was so muted. They got engaged in the snow and it was all the same. They're also brown and they were in the snow. And so I was like, well, yeah, because that's the only color that's showing up, And so I think even like having my couples, helping them walk through that of like, yes, our style might change based on the location. If I'm shooting on the beach in Hawaii and there's blue everywhere, it's just inherently going to look maybe brighter because it's 2:00 than golden hour at Deception Pass, where everything's green and the blue is way more muted. And so I try to do that with my couples too, of like inquiry, hey, show me who you like, talking through that process. Because when I show them 2 different photos of mine, one might look brighter and more airy, and one might look dark and moody. This is after sun, this photo B is post sunset, sun's gone, it's blue hour, and photo A is a 12:00 ceremony in broad daylight. So I tried to do that as well.
I think that's.
I wanted to go ahead.
No, I'll hop on after. Go for it.
I just want to comment on that too, and it's super important. And so, like I would say, 99% of all the weddings I shoot are afternoon, evening weddings, as most weddings are. And so, the one unhappy client that I had got married in the morning, and she was like, "The pictures don't look like what I wanted," and I was like, "Okay, let's fix this. Let's figure out what happened. Like, where was there a miscommunication? How have I not met your needs?" And so she sent me all of her pictures that she really liked. And so she got married at maybe like 9 in the morning. She got married in the shade, in dappled shade with like a big blue sky behind her. And so as we know as photographers, to match for her being the shade, the sky was a little blown out. Whatever, there's different ways to do it. My mistake, maybe not taking more into account and thinking it would matter as much. Anyway, so she sent me all the pictures that she liked, and they were all from like 2 p.m. on. And I was like, I see. Okay, let me explain. And I don't think you're going to love this answer, but here's why. So like, this is just conditions of the day. The same as like, if you're in the snow, like it's going to look a little flatter. Depending on if it's an overcast day, we're not going to have bright, crisp blues or bright, crisp greens. It's just, and that's why I think like dark and moody and like light and airy, like there are those extremes. And I feel like a lot of us fall into the same thing. We're like, it really depends on where we are and what we're doing and like the actual weather, like the situation that we're in. So I think that's really important too, like over managing expectations. And that was my fault with her wedding too, is I hadn't asked her like when the wedding was, and we didn't get a timeline until like a month out. And I didn't even think to like, oh, it's a morning wedding. I should tell her that it'll be different. So that can happen. And I think that's really important too with style. So more so than style, I'm like, how do you want to feel in these pictures? And again, cool, I can help you feel that way because I'm good at my job. I'm good at creating that space for you to feel those things. And cool, vibe check. You want to feel those things? Great. Now go back and double check at my portfolio if you can like feel those things from my portfolio and that you like the color. So like, I feel personally, style is the first thing that catches people. But even if someone had a beautiful gallery that I loved and I couldn't vibe with them, or like we didn't connect on the phone. So I always recommend like do a phone call, pick your top 5, top 10, reach out, do phone calls. And like, I'm all about like, you should imagine me being at your wedding. I will be next to you the whole time. more than like your partner, more than your bridesmaids, I will be with you. So like, you can't imagine me being like an honorary bridesmaid or just even a guest at your wedding. That's going to be like, it doesn't matter how beautiful your pictures are. You'll remember that I sucked. You remember that you didn't like me.
Yep.
Yeah, it's tough. You know, like I said, with these styles and with the aspects of the day, you know, the weather and all that. One of the best weddings I ever. It's still one of the best ones on my wedding website. You know, really overcast October day, right? It was rainy, whatever. And I love the photographer that we had, but you know, they were so in their style, radically different. And I mean, you wouldn't even know, you know, so bright and airy, you know, ratchet up. I mean, you wouldn't even know that it was the same day, right? I mean, you look at this, you know, and I showed my wife, and she's like, "Really? Like this is the same?" I go, "Yeah, you know," and that's fine. I mean, like Chelsea said, you know, you can force that, right? You know, if to fit that style. I think we had Gina on our floral trends one this last week. And I think this really is applicable to photography as well, where you know you guys want people you know that jive with the style, that want your interpretation of things. And she said the same thing when you know when it came to being a florist. It's like if you were a chef and you wouldn't go to somebody and be like, you know, how did you do this? I want a grilled cheese sandwich with like this or whatever on it. You would say, hey, I trust your expertise, right? I want your interpretation of whatever that is, right? So that way, like, you know, Chelsea said, you know, if it's a morning wedding or if it's a dark wedding or if it's, you know, I work with all these photographers that are like natural light, whatever. And then the client gets married in like a barn somewhere and they have to use flash the whole time or whatever, right? So it's, you need to you know make sure that whoever you're hiring, right, that you want maybe their interpretation of what your day is, as opposed to just like these are the 16 photos that I want exactly made right back at me. Jamie, what do you want when people reach out to you on your website or Instagram or however they get in touch with you? What do you want them? Some questions that people, you know, the brides, grooms, whoever couple should be asking. What do you want them to be saying? You know, when they reach out.
So I think for me, before they even start asking questions, once they've kind of vibed with my style, and they can, like Chelsea said, they can see themselves in the photos. I want them, like also Chelsea said, I want them to imagine if they could stand me for, you know, 6, 8, 10 hours following them around. Like, are they gonna have fun with me, or are they gonna just be like, you're just the hired help? Like, if I have like a thing on my contact page where I'm like, I kind of place my values, and I'm like, if yours align with this, send me an email. If they don't, because I don't even want you coming to contact me at that point, because we're not going to have a good relationship. Like, you need to imagine that, like, I basically want to show up to a wedding feeling like I'm going to a friend's wedding. And I know I'm going to have for 8 hours, I'm going to have a good time. And I'm going to be able to like relax into the day versus like wondering whether, you know, these people are the same as me. If that makes sense.
So you say that it's both that you want it's important for you equally for someone to jive with your style and also the personality that you're bringing to the wedding, which I think is something that a lot of people that are booking don't. Not that it's not important to every vendor type, but I do think like your personality should vibe significantly more with your photographer than like the person that's doing like the rental drop offs, right? For you, not that obviously we don't want everybody, you know, everyone we want to be friends with everybody and everybody to get along, but and that's the same thing I deal with video, right? Is they think, oh, I'm going to have my photographer. I'm going to do the engagement session. We're going to meet for coffee 18 times. We're going to do all this. But it's like, I'm also there too, right? You know, and so I do some of that. So you're saying, so when someone that's, you know, engaged is looking on the website, looking for photographers, that both sides of their brain, right, should be, you know, equally looking at style and then also personality and vibe. Is that, am I saying that right?
Yeah, definitely. Like you, and not even just personality. Like, I guess it kind of ties into personality, but like, what are their values? Like, don't just give your money to someone because it's, you know, someone who makes pretty pictures. Like, make sure they're, you know, a decent human being. They're not going out on the weekends and like murdering children or something. Um, like, make sure that this is someone that you could picture having, like, make sure it's someone that you go to the pub with for 6 hours on a bender. Like, because you're gonna, I mean, you're not gonna go on a bender on your wedding day, but you're gonna spend 6 hours with them. Like, is it gonna be 6 hours of just kind of awkwardly trying to make small talk with them, or is it 6 hours where you're like cracking jokes together and having a good time? Like, I would rather spend money on something that I know is going to be fun versus something that is just being spent to be done.
And I'm going to go to Aspen after this. It's so funny. I have one photographer. It's one of the only photographers I've ever had, run-ins, beef with at weddings. And this goes back like 5-6 years. And every time I work with this one photographer, I always know what the couples are going to be like. And it's weird that like that they gravitate to, but it's always like, it's always the same kind of wedding. Like I always get along with the couple. I try to get along with everybody, but like it's just certain personalities mesh with this photographer versus, other people. Right. And it's clearly that they're, and that works for them. Right. And they're working and whatever, but I always know exactly what that vibe is going to be like walking in, like you said, Jamie, to that wedding. I know what that wedding's going to look and feel like if that photographer is there. So what do you think about that? People reaching out, booking, looking at things, questions, all the topics we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I recommend to my friends, anyone who I know who's like getting engaged, who's not reaching out directly to me first as a client, is to sit down and kind of figure out what your values are and what you value during the day. I think that knowing that helps dictate and direct a lot of your steps and who you hire. I think, and Jamie, you talked about that as like, what are your values? So for example, I've had a couple who was like, we really want to spend time with our friends and family. This is like pre-COVID, but we have people flying in from around the world. Really important. We really want to spend happy hour with them. We know that usually happy hour, they've done a lot of research. They're like, we know usually happy hours when we do romantic portraits. We're going to hire you to do that another time. We really want to spend time with our people. And like having them come to me with that already was really helpful to be like, yeah, okay, great. We're on the same page. It's both parties working together to really set that expectation for the day. Because had I not known that, I would have just been rolling on, right? Using that time to get these portraits. But instead we built it out to where we did portraits before. And then after happy hour, we took a little bit of time and did that after, but I made sure that they had like a solid hour of just spending time with their people, where I also got to just chill, which was great. So I think knowing what you as a couple want and what you value should give you another layer of a filter for who you hire. And I think too, I even before booking, I again pre-COVID would go out for a drink with people and just get to know them. I love it. Kind of like we talked about earlier, but like the litmus test of, like, did you read my website? When couples are like, hey, we saw you love Panic at the Disco. We also love Panic at the Disco. Thanks for sharing that. And it's like, oh, great. Now I have something to respond with. And we can kind of, it's like online dating a little bit, where it's like, you got to find some way to connect with this person. And so like, read my profile, like read my website. I wrote a lot about myself and who I am and what I value. Pick a value that you also align with. And like, let's talk about how to incorporate that, because I think the photographer has a lot of power in guiding that day and making it busier or less busy, and working together to create the day that you want. And I think, it's tricky. I've had a couple of people, who don't want to talk when they reach out, and that's pretty difficult. So I would say as a couple, like, get ready to invest in that preliminary contact of like what I call the first date of like, let's talk, because, if we don't hit it off, it might not be the best fit, and that's okay.
Chelsea, thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things. I know a lot of people teach a lot of different things, like, oh, don't make your clients do anything. I'm like, I think it's really important. Like, if you don't, and I get that people are really busy, and I think that's something to do with the price brackets that you're in as well. Like, sometimes I don't get to meet my clients because it's a planner referral, and we're just trusting our mutual vibe check that like, okay, cool. I trust her enough that this client is gonna be perfect for her, and vice versa. That I trust that you can do the job. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, here's the proposal. So sometimes we don't get to meet them, and it's a lot of just trust. So that goes in with, like meeting your vendors, getting good relationships with vendors. And so I would say for clients, like if you hire, or couples, if you hire a planner first and they come with recommendations, I think definitely consider those recommendations, go through, look at their work, make sure you like that, make sure that like, hopefully most photographers at this point and most websites, you can get at least some iota of their personality from just reading their website. And I always personally, like I get a lot of my business from Instagram. So I always vouch for Instagram, like go check their Instagram, watch their stories. Hopefully they show up or go into their highlights and you can see how they talk, like how they speak, like, and just being able to get a general kind of gut reaction to somebody, I think is important because same thing, like you're trusting us with something super important and most of us are in the bracket and it's going to be several $1,000s. So it's not an easy, it's not a light investment. It's not, I think, a decision that should be made like flippantly or quickly. And I feel like typically in that $3,000 to $7,000 investment range, it's people of like a particular skill set and who should be able to meet you where you're at and answer all of your questions. Like that's one of my things. Like it's never, I personally don't believe it's ever my client's job to know what they're looking for. They should just know that they like me and have a connection to me, and then we can talk and continue. Hopefully they've done a little bit of research and maybe read my website to know, like, can we even afford them? But that's kind of where I stand on it. Like, I should have the basic information out there. They should be able to like, yep, let's go through. I think it's important to just like have, as a client, and I use this word so much, but like vibe checks, like having a vibe check every so often. Do you like their website? Cool. Yes. Do you like their Instagram? Yes. And it's really important. Like if you see a big disconnect anywhere, like I personally vote for running in the opposite direction. It's like everything should be cohesive for this person that you're hiring. Like how awful, again, that's why like looking at their presence online and then having like the conversation with them, like is who they are or who they're portraying themselves as online actually who they are when they speak to you. Like if they're saying they got these whatever values and they speak to you in a weird way, or you just like feel some type of way that's not ideal, that's super important. And so I'm all about a good vibe check. Like make sure you like this person, make sure there's no like weird, sketchy things anywhere at all. And I think as you get higher, as you pay more and more, as you're willing to invest more and more, there's less, that's not true. There's occasionally less chance of that, but still the same way. Like I know like sometimes we as photographers can get big egos and be like, oh, like maybe this is my client because they're getting married in a barn. And like, again, make sure that you have a conversation because if they treat you like less than, this is going to be the person that's going to be with you all day. Nothing worse than getting a beautiful thing and just remembering that the experience was bad. So like going to a restaurant and having a really, really great meal, but just remembering that the waiter was super, super rude to you kind of sours the whole thing. Same goes for your wedding photographer.
Aspen, you had the note.
Yeah, I think kind of on that same vein, I would recommend to couples who are looking for a photographer to get out of the mindset. And Jamie, you touched on this of hired, like of being hired help, or like you're just a vendor. Like that can be a big shift because God forbid anything awful happen. But like even Chelsea, you told the story about how you were able to even have the conversation to explain why the photos look different. That's because you had that kind of relationship where they weren't like, I'm going to sue you because you didn't deliver what I wanted. And it's like, that's where like all of that stuff that we're talking about matters. It's like, at the end of the day, yes, we're a business and yes, this is our client, also humans. And like, to be able to even get to that point of having that conversation of like, hey, my photos look weird. Why is that? You want to be able to say that to your photographer and expect and trust that they're going to respond accordingly and with a good response. You know, I think that relationship can save a lot of miscommunication if there is, God forbid, again, but I think that relationship piece is key.
Do you think that that's undervalued or underappreciated or underthought of when people are entering into, maybe they get that, 6 months down the road or after their wedding day, but do you think going into hiring a photographer that they don't necessarily, the couples booking don't realize how important that relationship is that they're going to have with their photographer?
No, they don't, because I think like I talk to my couples about this all of the time when they first inquire. Is like, I'm going to be seeing you more than your mom, more than your partner. Like, you are not marrying me, but in some instances, especially when it's not a priority to get time with your people, you're literally seeing me more than anybody else. So you better make sure that we get along, both partners get along with me, because that is where I think a lot of miscommunication can live, is if we don't have a good relationship, or if we're coming from another vendor referral. Like, again, I talk a lot with the planners, and it's like, okay, great, I get along with the planner, but like, do we actually matter? And so as a couple, don't necessarily just trust, like you said, Chelsea, don't necessarily just trust your planner to give you the perfect person, even though they get along. It's like, you really need to make sure that this is someone that you can have conflict resolution with, because your day is going to be stressful, and can you trust them to help walk you through those difficult moments with your future mother-in-law, etc.
Jamie, what do you think?
I was actually just lamenting the other day about the fact that we currently can't have in-person wedding consults, and like the whole doing it through Zoom thing is just, it's the same and it's not the same, because there's always those like weird awkward silences between people talking and stuff, and it just doesn't feel the same. So I kind of feel like people reaching out right now for weddings are kind of a disadvantage for that, and I feel for them, because I'm a lot more fun when we're sitting in a coffee shop than when I'm sitting at the other end of my computer just being like super awkward, because I'm like, oh, did they try and say this? Oh no, wait, I don't know what. So it's kind of, you should definitely wear COVID safe, try and meet up with your person. I don't think I've ever booked a wedding without meeting them first. So that's definitely like the gate. Like, you need to talk. Like, you can say, and I guess people these days have it a lot easier because of things like Instagram stories. Like, you can post, the most flowery, nicest Facebook post, blog post, even Instagram regular post, and look like an altogether suave person, and then people go to your Instagram stories and you're just a hot mess. But that also makes you more human. Like, that, there's that extra layer of connection, even though you're not necessarily doing it for that person. They then feel that connection to you, and that might cause them to reach out. So I think that's like so good these days, and why more people should be doing Instagram stories.
Chelsea, thoughts, and then I'll have a comment after.
Yeah, and so and this is super unique to every photographer, every client, and how the personalities mix. So for me, being dually based, and especially, in Hawaii, I personally don't do in-person meetings even before this, just because it never really worked out for my schedule. Like, I do meetings with my booked clients, but I do all of my consults over the phone, and that's just my preference and my business practice. So I'm a busy person, and typically my clients also end up being busy people. So we're like, kind of like the same thing, like, oh, how you're doing this podcast, where like, we could go around for months trying to actually get a coffee date, but like, we could also hop on the phone in 5 minutes. So that's my personal thing. And also with personalities, I think it's important to consider not just that you like them, but that your personalities can mix. So, I have a bigger personality. I'm loud. I have a lot of energy. I'm like really excited at weddings. And sometimes that is what people need, and sometimes that's too much. So also considering what type of photographer you want to have. So do you want someone who's going to be able to guide you through the day, or do you want someone that you don't notice? Because both are fine. It all depends on what you want. And then still having that conversation of like looking at a full portfolio. That's another thing we didn't mention. But when you do talk to people, ask to see a full gallery, because like everybody, our Instagrams and our websites are our highlight reel. We're showing you the best because we want you to know that we can do excellent things. And it's also really important, especially if your budget has you hiring someone in the lower range, is making sure that they can photograph a full day with excellence, and not just the pretty parts with the sunset and the nice dress, or that someone's portfolio isn't just like a styled shoot. Anyways, that's totally off topic, but meeting in person, I think, is really important. Personally, I feel grateful. I can put my personality and connect with people pretty much anywhere at any time. I'm grateful for that. But that's not the case for all people. And even with my clients, like, I've met a lot of people, and it is kind of awkward sometimes, just like, is there a question? So my personality makes this a more successful approach for me, because I'm just like, all right, let's set the scene, let's handle that. And I think there's more that, as photographers, that like knowing that, like, just starting with that, like, all right, Zoom things are not as great as in person, but we're doing what we can do. So if there are any awkward pauses, like, I apologize in advance. So if I talk over you, so sorry, my internet is garbage. But yeah, we're all just doing the best we can. And even with that, like, do you want someone like who can like, all right, this is going to be awkward. I promise I'm going to be much funner in person. Or like, and giving yourselves and your photographers some grace. Like, if you do have connection issues and it is awkward, like, try again. If you really like them or there was something there, like, try again and give each other grace both ways.
I agree with that. And I think, like you said, lots of different personality types, and neither is right or wrong, right? It's what do you need? I work with a plethora of photographers, and some are in your face, and some aren't, and some are moving the fingers around to try to get pre-COVID to try to, okay, your hand needs to go, and then some are not, right? And so it's really, like you said, finding what works best. I do want to talk about that. You were talking about so looking at full portfolios, looking at work, right? I will tell my funny story here really quick. One of the only really unhappy couples we ever had was a couple years ago. Mom of the bride books us like 2 weeks out. It's like something fell through, something or other, and so we go and it seems fine. It's like a really not a nice wedding. Like it's just kind of, just not really aesthetically whatever. And we do our best. I like threw in all this drone stuff and everything. And we send it over and bride hates it. And I'm like, what, like totally like not one redeeming quality of this at all. And so, we go back and forth, and it finally comes out after about 3 or 4 emails back and forth that she never looked at one thing of anything on the website at all, before, right? Because, my work is pretty consistent. We have hundreds of these videos to look at. And so that I'm like, well, I don't take any blame of this anymore. Right. Because like Chelsea said before, sometimes, they're looking for one thing, you do the best you have, but I mean, there's no excuse when you haven't looked at anything and you don't necessarily know what you're getting into. So when it comes to photography, we got portraits all over everything, right? Beautiful stuff on the website. What should couples be looking at and asking to see and trying to see when they're hiring a photographer? Who wants to start with this one?
I'll start.
Okay, Jamie, go for it.
Yeah, I would definitely say, and I'm kind of one of those people that pushes it on them because I don't think a lot of people know, or I think a lot of people might think that it's kind of offensive to ask, but ask for a full gallery. Like, I mean, most websites nowadays have blogs on them, and that's good. But again, that's still a curated gallery to a point. It might show the whole day, but it's showing the best of the whole day. So yeah, definitely like ask to see a full gallery. If someone says no, then that's straight up a red flag, because even if you've done, 5 weddings, 10 weddings, not all of them are going to be like, show my photos to anyone. So there's absolutely no reason why somebody shouldn't have a full gallery. Okay, there might be like a hosting thing, but they can take a day and upload it somewhere, whatever. But there should absolutely be a full gallery made available from the start of the day to the end of the day, everything that they delivered, and hopefully it will match what's on their website.
Well, and maybe Aspen, when do you agree with that first off? And then if people are looking through, what are things that they should be considering? What are things they should be asking, as the couple when they're looking at these, like a full gallery? Because I wouldn't know, right? Like I wouldn't even know what to look at.
Yeah, I think that the full gallery thing is huge. And I'm thinking back, even as I'm listening to this, of how many couples have not asked me for a full gallery, which is kind of shocking. I think it's absolutely, I think that should be a deal breaker if you don't like the full gallery. And granted, ask those follow-up questions of like, hey, why does this look different? Oh, it was a 9 a.m. ceremony. That can be a great starter to asking and having those conversations, set those expectations. Like ask for a full gallery. I think knowing what you value, again, already coming into that conversation is going to be so helpful. Like, for example, I've mentioned this, my sister recently got married. My parents, for example, don't have any photos of themselves, like any good photos. I don't know why I haven't taken photos of them yet, but on my radar now. But I was like, hey, this is going to be a great opportunity. I really want photos of my parents to remember and of, like that, because they've been married for like 33 years and it's awesome. And so I told the photographer that, and I was like, yeah, it's not my day, but I know my sister values that. And I know what my sister values, and I'm kind of helping translate that as a photographer. And that was an expectation that we set as well with the photographer. But I think like knowing what you want already. So if family portraits are really important to you, family portraits often don't make it in the Instagram post. They don't often make it in the blog post. Ask for a full gallery and look at the family portraits. If you don't like them, that's usually what people use. And what people look at, right, is like the couple and their grandma who passed away recently or whatever. It's like, that's what, at least for me, being on the other side of that as a family member of the bride, that's what I value. And so oftentimes I think we know as wedding professionals that gets blitzed through. Like, that is like, family portraits are chaotic. They're one of my least favorite parts of the day. But now that I have the other side of that perspective, Chelsea, you're laughing at me, but that's fine. They can be really difficult to manage and get through. But knowing how important that was to me, I need to know that about my client if that's the most important thing. That way I know how to move. And I think this comes with time. And this is where the Facebook blasts you can get a little lost. Is like, I'm not trying to build a portfolio anymore. I mean, sure, if I get a kick-ass wedding, awesome, I'll add it. But I'm not like dying for the details anymore. And I think that's something that I was really hungry for my first year, where I would spend 30 minutes photographing the tables and crying my way through the family portraits, when that's not or like taking pictures of the shoes. It's like, I maybe want one photo of the shoes, but like, that's not what it's about. And so I think that's one of the things too, with expertise and time and longevity of being in this industry, which is going to cost you, but you're going to get a different result, right? It might, like, one of my friends is Annie Graham. Love her. She's an awesome photographer. We talk about this all the time. I have second shot for her. And it was so funny. I think like one of the first times I second shot with her, I was like, oh, do you want to get pictures of the ring? And she's like, no. Like, I don't care about that. My client doesn't care about that. And like, she did not say it in that way at all. She was very nice. She was like, no, it's totally fine. Like, I don't need it. It's fine. Or do it if you want. But like, even just knowing that shift of perspective of when I was starting versus she's solidly in her career, like, and how she builds, again, that feeling. It's not about, oh God, I need all this for Pinterest and for myself. It's like the shift suddenly changes from portfolio building to your client and their actual needs, which usually are more candids and more like random group photo moments during the cocktail hour and less posed stuff. And so I think all that's super important.
I think that's a fantastic point, and that's definitely somewhere I deal with that a lot with video people too. And I remember early on, we used to do these like videographer meetups all the time, and they were asking like, well, do you post every wedding that you do? Do you do all this? And we're a volume studio. We do a lot of weddings every year, and so. Not every wedding has to be like website ready. And that doesn't mean that it's not a beautiful wedding for them and that's not, but like you said, when you have your portfolio and you know that, or you guys have your referral base and your Instagram and everyone's going to book you guys anyway, it really does allow you to focus on what does my client want, and what do they need. And I think that's great. I used to spend an hour hanging the dress and I would go up on the roof and hang it off the chimney and my assistant would be hanging. I mean, I'm serious. Like, my assistant almost fell off a roof. We were out at that Seaback Park out in the peninsula, but like now, if you spend a minute on that, and then you're able to spend 30 minutes with the groom getting ready with his mom or whoever, or the grandma's there putting the necklace on or whatever. I mean, it's just way different, and I do love that, like, that shifting perspective where you do. To relate it back to the Facebook posts and stuff, where a lot of the people on there, and it's not wrong, but they're trying to build portfolios, they're trying to do that, and just know that as a client, you're competing with that other desire, right? During the day, whether they're intending it to be or not, right? If you have a portfolio, it's just different. You're going into that, right? I mean, Chelsea, do you get what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you said, there's nothing wrong with hiring someone who's building their portfolio. You just have to know that there is more assumed risk with that. And so, and this is something too, like as photographers and videographers or just in general visual artists of the wedding industry, not everybody cares. Not everybody cares about having a super, super dope portfolio of or gallery of their images. Some people just want it captured. And so there is a photographer for everyone. And so some of the lament I hear, like with Facebook posts, like, oh my God, like everybody's on there and like there's people undercutting and whatever, like it shouldn't matter. Because like for me, like my goal is like, well, and luckily, as I've been in this long enough, like those aren't my clients anymore. If someone tags me in it, great, they can come and find me. But typically, like there's a specific client that goes to a Facebook post for what they want or that they just don't know. And there's a specific photographer that is excited for those. And all of that is excellent. All of that's fine. But like you were saying, and like both you and Aspen, there is a switch. And so sometimes I do get clients that are just like, hey, can you I like a wedding I had in October. She's like, I want all the details. Like I've put so much time and effort into these details. I'm like, perfect. I'll photograph the shit out of those. Awesome. But some people don't care at all. And that's a part of the interview process too. So like if a photographer doesn't ask you what's important to you, that's like you should be able to already have that conversation before you get booked. So again, that's part of like, do they care about me? Do they care about my wedding? Do they care about how I want my wedding to be and how I want to experience it? And, you know, not everyone is like purposely excluding that question, but it's important to notice if they ask you about those things. Cause like, yeah, with Annie Graham, like her clients don't want that. And she is established enough that like her portfolios don't include these curated photos of their, you know, the dress hanging on like the peak of Mount Everest or whatever, or the ring like so perfectly whatever, and that's fine. And that's again very different styles of photography. So there's very stylized, there's more documentary like journalistic approaches, and so that's something you can decide too. So auditing yourself, like what are the most important parts? Like I always ask, like, are you more interested in like it being a photo shoot? Like as a bride, I wanted a damn photo shoot. I loved the dress I had. I was like, I'm gonna take extra time before my cocktail. I'm gonna put extra booze at the reception. I'm gonna go get my photo shoot with my husband, and that's what I want. Like I'm hiring my dream photographer, paying a bunch of money for it. That's what's important to me. And then yes, I wanted family portraits. So you like are typically will attract the right people, but like it's not our decision or choice to like tell our client what matters to them. Like I am of the belief that as a photographer, if someone's paying me my premium, that I need to be delivering their day for them. And like again, throughout the process, like we're gonna attract people based on the portfolios that we have out. I still have had people like, hey, will you photograph this kind of wedding and like do all of these kind of things? And it's like all off camera flash, or it's all like super dramatic, like whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, how did you find me? Like, did you see any? I don't do any of that at all. Like, I wish I was so cool, but no, that is, you will be terribly unhappy if you hire me. Let me refer you out. So, yeah,
Yeah, we
I
have.
think having the portfolio is important, but
Yeah, we had
mhm.
our Halloween wedding this year. It was the same thing that we did not 1 second of romantic portraits the whole day at all. And my assistant, he goes, well, like we got to go get them. We got, we got to get them outside. I said, why? They don't want that. They're hanging with their friends. Like they don't want that at all. If they wanted that, we would have time to go do it. I certainly don't need this wedding for my portfolio, right? Everyone's masked. We're in this weird Airbnb, right? I mean, it's, it was, they did a good job, but I'm like, I don't need this. Like, why are we going to stress about making them do something that they don't want to do, that they clearly have no interest in? They've hired this photographer a million times to do, they've got all these pictures of them everywhere. Why do they need, what do they need 15 minutes of us having them walk through the woods for when they could be spending time with their families? So yeah, I think, like you said, knowing, what that client wants is important. We're kind of running time here. I mean, we could go forever about this. I don't want to keep you guys, all day. Obviously, this is a topic that we can, go back into later. I think Chelsea had a comment, and then, maybe final thoughts for today. Maybe not forever, but at least for today about this. I really, appreciate everyone's time, and I hate to have this go on, all afternoon like it could. Chelsea, what do you say?
The last thing I wanted to add as far as that is like knowing what our client, and again, like I am very much of the camp that our clients don't know because they don't know. Like we are in this industry, we're doing this all the time with so many different types of people. So it's one thing for our clients to tell us what they want and for us to also be able to hear what they want and what they need. So a lot of times like, oh, I don't really care, whatever. I don't care about my family portrait. I'm like, okay, well, I think you'll be pretty, let's just do two, like pick your two favorite, and thinking of things like that. And then sharing from our own personal experience. So like I've been married, and one thing that I never thought about was like, we rushed through our family portraits, and I had asked her, I was like, oh, should I make a shot list for you? And she's like, no, it's fine. And I was like, okay, we only had 25 people. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. We cycled through most of them, but I wanted more pictures with like, I only had two maids of honor. So I would have liked more pictures with them. And I hadn't thought about any of this and got so swept up in my timeline and the day that I like, it didn't even cross my mind. And so being able to educate our clients, like, oh, with the shot list or the photos that what you want, how you want to experience your day, what photos do you want to print? Like, family photos don't make it to our Instagrams typically, but those are the ones that get printed. Those are the ones people buy. Those are the ones that you have on your mantle forever, or you send as thank you cards. So I didn't get a picture with my sibling. And I was like, we're never together. And we have a family photo, but none with just, me and them. So little things like that for us to hear and then offer our perspective and like, oh, I've never thought about that. Thank you so much. Yes, let's do a quick one. And then, whatever, we just wing it and go through it. But hearing what they want, or people like, I don't want any bridal portraits. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to just sneaky get a couple for you. I won't take a lot of your time, but I feel like you'll still love them. And I've had that experience too, where like the groom doesn't want any of it, but he's like, oh, I'm really glad you did that. And I'm sorry I was a turd about it, but I really, really love those pictures. Thank you so much. And so it's part of our job. Like, I hear what you're saying. I hear this, but I'm going to give you this other perspective too. Cool, cool, cool. You won't even notice. So that was my last thought on that is clients think that they know what they want and they do, but we also know what they need. And like for people who are charging a premium, for us to be able to deliver that and like exceed their expectations is really important.
Yeah, that's why I always fight to, well, not, it's weird right now, but with, getting a lot of like pre stuff, getting ready for video, especially, I'm like, oh, we just want you on for the, just come for the first look, or like right when we're done getting ready. I'm like, man, that hour of you guys shooting the shit and playing cards and all that stuff, like that's the stuff you want. A lot of people for us want the video, right? I mean, you're going to frame all your other stuff and whatever, but you're going to be, oh yeah, look at this. And we were, humping each other, being funny, or, wrestling on the ground, or, whatever it is. Right. But that's always the stuff that they're like, oh, this is so, I'm so glad we have all this stuff, where I'm like, was it, it was probably worth paying that extra hour or whatever for us to come early to be able to kind of, get all that stuff. Aspen, final thoughts for today. Yeah. I appreciate everyone coming on. Any parting words for, this so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that we've talked about, if we're going to try to synthesize it, is like, if you're looking for a wedding photographer, find someone that you like and take the time to find someone that you like, because that relationship is super important. Figure out what you value. I think going into that, knowing that you really want those family portraits with your siblings, knowing that you really want pictures of your shoes, is super important to help set those expectations. And I think, asking the question is the most important question is, hey, can we get together? Can we talk? Can we find a way to connect with each other to figure out where we're at with each other? I think that's super important. And just remembering that you're trying to hire a friend. I know that sounds really cheesy and really maybe lame, but it's like, this is someone who's going to be with you for most of the day on one of your most important days. So make sure that you feel comfortable. The more comfortable you are, the more yourself you're going to be, the more that's going to show up in photos, which is going to provide, really excellent photos, which is ultimately what we all want for our clients.
It's great. Jamie, take us home.
So I think what I would say is, if you're out there looking for a photographer, and this sounds like, try and look at it as from a place of what you want versus what you can get. So and obviously it's, at the end of the day, it's going to be one of the most expensive days of your life. Because nobody else is going to be able to buy a home from now on. So it's going to be an expensive day. You're going to be dropping a ton of money on this day, but try and look at it without putting the monetary value on it. Try and, look at what that person brings to the table without looking at their pricing first. And if you get to a point where you're like, yes, this is the person, and then you look at their pricing and it's still in, then I think you're up to a winner.
Yeah, read the damn websites. I tell you, all the bio stuff. I have our pricing linked or listed on like every page of my website, and I still 85-90% of the emails, hey, what are your packages and pricing? I'm like, I was just thinking like that might be the topic for next week, is because there's a whole debate, right? Do you list pricing? Do you not? Do you do all that stuff? But I'll tell you, nothing makes me madder than to get the email, hey, are you available? And then what are your packages? I'm like, I list that on every page. We're a volume studio. I'm very upfront with pricing. It's all on there. So thank you guys so much. I'll link everybody's stuff. Do you want to just a quick plug for anything? We'll go around. We'll start with Jamie and go back around. Any final plugs, anything that way? Jamie, thank you guys all so much for hopping on. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. You can find me on Instagram at Jamie Buckley Photography, jamiebuckleyphotography.com, and facebook.com/Jamie Buckley Photography.
That sounds right.
I'm not on TikTok because I'm not cool enough.
Aspen, I'm so glad we got to meet today. Why don't you plug your stuff?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. My name is Aspen Jeannè, for anyone who's confused. So Instagram at Aspen X Jeannè, aspenjeannè.com. I also am not on TikTok, but I'm okay with that. Thanks for having me.
Great. And Chelsea, I'm glad as well to meet. I'm glad Jamie could come on. I'm glad we could get some new voices as well on here, which is great. I do tend to go to the well a lot with the same people sometimes. So I'm glad to definitely get new people on here.
He's bored of me.
Yeah, I'm Chelsea. I am on everything. I am on all the platforms everywhere. So at Chelsea Abril, there's 2 A's in there, like April with a B. I'm one of many happy little brown girls living in the Pacific Northwest and happily serving Hawaii and Seattle. So yeah, have fun with your wedding planning. Hopefully once in a lifetime thing that you do, and have fun with it.
Yeah, and this is good. I think we kept this positive today. Sometimes when we start crapping on Facebook posts or something, we get a little negative on here. So I think we all did a good job and lots of insight. So thank you guys all so much again, and take care, and everyone stay safe.
Thank you.